Okay.
Hi, it's Dr. Janie Pendleton. We are back with my husband, Dr. John Pendleton, and we are getting the chance to interview him again. You guys requested it, and I said that he was willing to do another subject with this. So today we are going to discuss in our prepper series, again this time. Last time we did gas mask, and you can go right here above our heads and you can hit that link and learn all about how to buy your children's gas mask, how to measure them and things like that. He gave a lot of really good tips on that as well. But today we're talking about how to prep medically for an SHTF situation or a WROL situation. Is it feasible for the average person to buy a surgical kit or a suture kit? You know, I wanted to get his opinion on this. I've got a lot of mixed opinions, and especially for myself. So I had questions as well, and I wanted my husband's opinion. So we're going to talk about several things today. We're going to talk about the difference between a surgical kit and a suturing kit. Sounds pretty basic, but I think you're going to be surprised that you might not know what you think you know. And you need to ask yourself these things before you go out and purchase a kit of what would suit your knowledge, what would actually work for you, and what are you willing to attain in knowledge in order to make it work for you and your family, you know, classes and things. And then the other thing we are going to discuss, you want to hold that up? We're going to discuss the pressure canner and some uses for the pressure canner. So stay tuned and stay with us, because what are we, John?
Live on the air.
That's right, we're live on the air. And I want to thank Hin Hin and for my live on the air sign. You did an excellent job on that. He made that for me. Can you believe it? And it's just beautiful. He knew that I wanted one, and I want to thank him for sending that. We got that in the mail today, and I told him, I said, when I get that in the mail, we're going to do one of our live shows. So here we are. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get started. So the first question is, Dr. Dad, what's the difference between the surgical kit and the suturing kit, and which one, as the average Joe, I mean, I've got my doctorate in divinity. You know it's not in medicine. So I'm going to ask him, as the average Joe that doesn't know a lot. I mean, I can do a little suturing. I'm a professional seamstress. I'm sure I can sew you up. But the question is would I want to sew you up? I mean, some wounds need to be closed, and some wounds I've seen, like my mom's wound, was left open. So what's the difference between the surgical and the suturing kit, and how do we know which to use? I mean, which one do we really need as the average Joe?
The average person, if you haven't taken a suturing class, you probably ought not to try to suture before you take a class.
Okay.
And if you've had the ability to be in the military, like I have, I'm a member of the United States Surgeons Association, and
we can put that certificate up as well. So if anybody questions it, we have the certification. So I've got all those diplomas are hanging up in the room. Yeah.
So if you've had ability to go to different advanced classes and to learn things from people, if they'll share it with you, that's a wonderful thing. Now, we've listened to some people on the internet, and they just say absolutely, this is absolutely unnecessary, unusable, and it's something that no one would actually use. That's really not a good idea. The more you can learn about something, the better off you are. And the idea is you may not have a doctor in reference to a medical doctor. You may be alone with somebody, and you have to simply stop the bleeding. So you have 8 liters of blood in your body, and you got to conserve the blood so that your brain and all the parts of your body can be fed. So if you come upon somebody, one of your family members, and they have a hole in them, you got to stop the bleeding, plug the hole. So it may require suturing.
So before CPR, so what he's saying is before you would, and I am CPR certified, so before you even think of doing CPR, if you know that they're dying from an actual wound from the loss of blood, you must stop that blood first then.
Take off your belt, tie it around them, or take off their belt, tie it around the wound, stop the bleeding. Now a lot of people say that's not a good idea. Well, you're in an emergency situation where you don't really have another option in reference to certain things. So you have to stop the bleeding. You can apply pressure, you can elevate the wound, you can do everything that you can do before you actually apply a tourniquet. You apply pressure first, you elevate the wound, and you allow some sort of pressure and bandaging to take effect. But if the bleeding isn't controlled, you'll have to put on a tourniquet. And if that delays some sort of treatment, you say, well, if I put on a tourniquet, there's going to be an issue with the loss of limb. The limb can live 8 to 6 hours after you apply the tourniquet. So if you can you can try to apply pressure, you can elevate the leg, you can do the things as far as pressure, bandage, and things like that. But if you're in a hurry and things are really bad, and you just want to save the person's life, putting a tourniquet on there is not necessarily the worst thing that could happen to them.
Now, I will say this, there's been some people out there who have recognized John. John actually in Balad, Iraq, at Jameson Combat Medical Training Center, he was actually the head teacher there, and there's been some people on our blog recently who have recognized John as their teacher. Oh, so I'm supposed to tell you hi from Sergeant somebody. It's a Rodatez or something like that. Well, I forgot to tell him that. So they are watching.
And they learned a lot in the Combat Medic Training Center.
With mass casualties.
How to care for mass casualties. So in the event that you don't have a physician or a trained person, you learn and you're trained, and one of the first things you want to do is stop the bleeding or control the bleeding. Then you can think about the airway, the circulation, and all the other different things.
Because if you don't stop the bleeding, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, they can bleed out their storehouse of blood. In your leg, in either leg, you can store up about 3 liters of blood per leg. So that only leaves about 2 liters to circulate the things throughout the body and the brain. And that's really not enough to survive. So stopping and controlling the bleeding, if you can, is the most important thing, yes.
So basically when you save somebody, you need to save somebody to the limit of your knowledge. So he's saying to go back to school, take some classes. There are some classes in each state that you can take. And I believe there is one course that you have to take.
Well, the basic soldier, when you get inducted into the military, all the soldiers go through basic life support. The doctors and the physicians know that they won't see a doctor or a physician. So they give them tourniquets and they equip them with some means to stop the bleeding, control things. Then when you get back to the rear or some other safe place, then you can think about suturing, taking off a tourniquet in a controlled environment, and doing some other different things.
Now you learn to suture on an orange.
Yeah, you can suture on an orange. And
so which kit do you suggest? Do you suggest just a suturing kit, or do you suggest a surgical and a suturing kit to have them on hand in case you do run across a doctor or somebody that's running low on supplies? Remember, even if you don't know how to do it, if you can at least get the tourniquet on, get the heartbeat going, get them stabilized, get them comforted, and you can get them to the hospital. This gets you, it's basically what an EMT would do, or a family member do before an EMT member got there. Just get something started. Then let's say you've got a doctor that lives behind you, or a nurse that lives behind you, and you get her to come over and you get her to stop and help. Isn't it good to have these tools on hand, just so they got sterilized tools handy for you?
Well, yeah, if you have the tools, then they can do the job. So, this has a scalpel that you can put the blade in. The blades come separately from the scalpels.
This isn't something that we're selling, by the way. I'm just showing you one of the many kits that we have, and this is actually a surgical and suturing kit. It's for an emergency.
You can have steri strips or band-aids to pull together the wounds.
Steri strips are another name for butterfly strips.
There are staples that you can use.
There are the disposable skin stapler guns. Okay. And so there's staples, and there's 2 different sizes of these in the kit, a large staple and a small staple.
And these are to take out the staples, so that's what that is.
Yeah. You want to know what this is? That takes the staples out.
Takes them out.
Yeah, and we'll show this up to you closer. We'll show this to you up close shortly.
When I was in Iraq and other different war zones, there are times that we left the bellies open, that we let the system drain, that, that you don't close a wound. And those are all decisions in reference to the physicians or the people that you're working with. In the field, when you're out saving lives initially, you apply pressure, you raise and elevate, you try to get the bleeding to stop. If you can't get the bleeding to stop, then you apply a tourniquet, mark a T on their head, take them back and have some idea of when you applied it, and then you can make some adjustments when you get back. Now, if you don't have a physician, then your choice is, if you don't take the tourniquet off within 8 hours, if you can't reconnect the artery or the vein, which you'd have to be able to suture it.
And there's different size needles and sutures, so that's another reason for taking a class, is then you learn the size of suture that you would use.
Yeah, if you have a tear in the vein and or the artery, and it's just torn out, and you don't have enough depth, you can't reach the artery to pull it back together. So you have to clean things up. So you basically take some sort of cleanser. Alcohol's not necessarily the best thing to use, but peroxide or some other kind of cleanser, and you've got to cleanse the wound. So you clean out the wound, you debride the wound, you get a visual on what's there and what's not there. And if you cannot reconnect the artery, if you cannot reconnect the veins by suturing them, then you may have to amputate the leg.
But the average Joe is not going to be able to do that.
Well, the average person, no, but in a situation that there's no one around, and they'll either disconnect the leg by some means of a scalp or a saw, or let it kill the person. So you do your best to help the person the best way that you can.
Okay.
That would be a terrible thing to have to do, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's your family member, I mean, you know. So I mean, and this right here is just some of the surgical tools here.
There's scissors, clamps, tweezers, forceps, where you can actually go on either side of an artery or vein and close it up while you're doing the suturing. And you want to be careful with these that you don't tear up the vein or the arteries that you're dealing with. You clean things out the best way that you can. If you need to sew things up, then you'll have to know how to suture things back together. But if the parts aren't there to suture back together, you're not in a position that you can go into another leg and cabbage or harvest a vein or an artery to use on the other side of the body. So in other words,
there's a knowledge and there's a depth and there's facilities. I mean, like, I think some of the things that we had talked about was, here, I'll set these aside for you. We'll talk about sterilizing these here in just a minute. So I think what that's leading us to then is let's talk about the things that you need in order to do a surgery. And if you're in a STHF situation, you know, and you're basing yourself on home supplies and home anesthetics and stuff like that, then you got to have a sterile field. Now, do you want to tell us what is a sterile field?
A sterile field is a place that is clean and it is sterile. So, but your environment also has to be sterile.
But there's no such thing as absolute sterile, other than the tools coming out of the enclave. But as soon as it hits the air, that wouldn't be sterile.
No, but here's how you'd have to do it. Mm-hmm. Let's say the outside of any packaging is not clean. Mm-hmm. It's so you'd have to have somebody. You'd have to have someone in the surgical room mm-hmm. to open things up mm-hmm. and drop them on a very clean towel or rag or something, and they'd open them up without touching them, and they'd drop them, and that's fastened.
Yeah.
That's fastened here, but they'd be dropping stuff onto that clean area. And generally on a table or something, and anything below the waist is generally considered not sterile. Yeah. So if it drops to the floor or below the waist, then you
wouldn't use it.
You don't use it anyway. You keep things on a nice clean area, your environment's clean, mm-hmm. your things have been cleaned.
But we're talking about a shit hits the fan situation. You're not going to have that kind of cleanliness. So the best you can do is put on your gloves, keep everything that's packaged like this as sterile as possible.
You hand me out of the package what I need. Mm-hmm. I'm the clean one here, and I'd be within gloves.
So I just did that right there. Okay, so let's do it again here. Hang on. All right, I haven't touched anything but the paper.
And I could retrieve the bandage or whatever it is,
Yeah,
and then I can apply that to the person. Or the suturing stuff, I would have to wait for my assistant, male, female, or whoever, to hand me whatever that is that's clean, and then I would use it based upon the situation. But once I touch the person, see,
Then you become unclean.
I'm sort of unclean anyway, but what you've done to the person is you've cleaned out the wound, you've debrided the wound, you've put betadine on it, and you've let it sit for like 15 minutes.
All right, so now we know what the sterile field is. It's the sterile area around us and maintaining yourself in a sterile environment while you're operating or
I would
suturing
be
or
holding my
something.
hands like this, below the waist is unclean. I'd have a nice clean table where you could put things.
But if it's a virus or an illness and it's not necessarily a wound, you'd be talking about a clean room. And we're going to do that on a totally different video, so don't even answer that question yet. That's something totally different. Right now we're talking about suturing and surgical practices, okay? Okay, so we covered that. So the next question would be anesthetics. So how do we get the anesthetics that we would need?
Lidocaine is an anesthetic. It locally numbs and will help numb an area if you're going to suture something. You don't want to use epinephrine with it, so there's lidocaine with epinephrine, lidocaine without epinephrine. If you use epinephrine, it can cause death to the tissue. So you don't want to do that.
Okay.
So lidocaine, just as a general, it comes in a spray form.
Without the epinephrine.
Without epinephrine, yes.
Right? Okay. So lidocaine without epinephrine. And is there any other kind of painkillers? Can we get them like at the vet or something? Is there anything that you recommend as far as anesthetics or painkillers? Because anesthetics, what are anesthetics? They're a painkiller.
A painkiller.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that we use in reference to things, they're not available. They're narcotic or they're unavailable in reference to certain things. Make them, grow them, or otherwise facilitate some environment that you had access to certain painkillers and stuff. That would be wonderful. Lidocaine is a wonderful thing, and some of it you can get over the counter, and you might be able to use it in a spray format and stuff, but it really won't take the edge off like you need it to suture up
You have to
somebody.
operate, or whatever you do, you have to pretty much do it.
You'd have to do it in a very
How about like an Oragel? Could you put that on the skin and numb the area just like it numbs your tongue or your mouth? I mean, can you operate that way? A little bit of Oragel just in the area to keep the sensitive nerves from, or would that not work?
well, you have to, if you're going to do, the nerve endings go different ways, and you have to digitally numb them, and you use lidocaine to do that.
Okay.
So, and you'd be injecting it into and by the nerve ending. So,
The surgery feeling it was a very, whew.
well, if
But I couldn't
you
see
can
it.
put people to sleep, God put Adam to sleep, and He took out his rib and made the woman. That's really the basis of modern anesthetics in reference to a surgical technique.
Okay, so we were just talking about, Lexi joined us. This is our dog Lexi. Hi there. We were just talking about how to soothe somebody in their actual faith. And I had a thing for John. So that last minute comfort, it's free of charge. It doesn't cost anything. There's no kit that you can buy that can make you help transition somebody into what they may believe is the next life, to God, or if it's Hindu or Muslim. I mean, even if you're an atheist, you can help somebody transition. To be kind, it's free, and there's no reason to be hateful and to watch a burning child shake like this. You may see that they've got a little cross or something hanging off a bracelet. So, what do you know at this point? Maybe they're a Christian and maybe you're Muslim. You can use that and know what they are and help them transition into death, and it's free of charge. And as doctors and nurses and stuff, medical professionals, even EMTs, firemen, they do it every day. They help people transition into what they believe would be their next life. So, I mean, how do you comfort somebody? I mean, like I said, it's free, but don't you think that's an important part of being in the medical field?
I do, and I don't think you have to violate your faith to do that. You can just you can be yourself, listen to people, and comfort them. People, if somebody's in a bad way in their mind, then a non-fatal injury could produce a fatality. So in order to raise their feet, cover them up, hold their hand, comfort them, goes a long way in treating that condition that we know as shock.
Saying that one of his fellow doctors said to him once, and what was that?
I used to work at Walter Reed in the medical intensive care, and one thing that we talked about as staff is some people die in spite of what we do. So whatever our intentions are, we try to do our best and they still pass on. Some people die because of what we do. There's a definite connection between what we do that would cause the person's death. And some people live in spite of what we do.
Regardless of what you do, they live through it.
Yeah, they live through it.
And some people die regardless what you do because they don't have the will to live.
Well, we're not in, when you get that idea that you're ultimately in control, we're not. And there is a mind or a force above us, and even the mind and the person that control an outcome. Because what you think, you can produce a negative outcome just based upon your perception or thought of it.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so how do you feel about hope?
Hope is a very important thing in reference to any kind of procedure. And if you think you're done, then you might be done.
Okay, yeah, I think it is an attitude too.
Yeah, it's a lot to do with
You
your
have a big
attitude.
mass thing. A lot of people won't want to live through that. You'd have mass suicides. You'd have, and we already got in a family in Utah. What was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago? They just committed mass suicide because they thought the signs of the times. Well, they said that Satan told them to kill themselves. Yeah, I thought that was really odd. So, but Satan will in the end of days. He does tell people to do things, and they will do it because they're not of God. So I'm just saying. That's my opinion. So reassuring someone is free. You can do that.
You know, to tell people I'm here for you, hold their hand, elevate their feet, give them any comfort measure that you can do for them
Talk about
within
their faith,
reason,
yeah.
and encourage them, hey, you have a reason to live. Things are not as bad as they seem, even if they seem pretty bad.
Yeah.
And
There's always tomorrow.
there's always tomorrow. This day will pass. The morning's going to come.
So you can treat somebody for shock as well then by doing that. Without any of these kits or anything, and you have no knowledge of medicine, you can still treat someone for shock by being kind and giving them hope and then helping them through their faith.
Yeah.
And I think my last question to John would be, does the risk of helping someone, does it, you know, some people say you don't need one of these if you don't know how to use a suturing kit or whatever, but in my opinion, I think the risk outweighs losing your child or your wife or your parent or a neighbor.
Well, there's been many people saved by CPR techniques that they learned over watching someone do it. They didn't. You may not think you have the skills, but if you do nothing, it could be worse.
If you take no action.
If you take no action at all.
Yeah.
So within the limited abilities and the things you have, it's just like amputating a leg. But if I put a tourniquet on somebody to stop the bleeding, and I looked into the vein, and there's no vein or artery or anything that I could suture back together or put back together, you'd have to do what you had to do in order to save the person's life. Because if you do nothing, they're going to die anyway.
Yeah. So you can either take action and they die, or take no action and they die, or you could take action and they actually lived.
Yes, that would be good.
When you view us in a situation, do you view us, if shit hits the fan right now, we would almost be like sent back to the Civil War days, would we not be? I mean, even the doctors themselves who are trained would have a really hard time, and nurses have a really hard time.
You shut the lights off and the computers off, you know, that we can't fly our airplanes without the computer.
You can't look up a medical condition with another doctor clear over in California or in France, you know, it's not there.
Some people can't read a map.
A lot of our equipment's based on electricity, our x-ray machines and our kidney pumps and our...
What ways north? Can you look at a compass? Do you have the basic survival skills that it would be necessary to survive if the lights went out? And that's only a question that you can ask yourself. So is there a reason to have a compass?
Yes.
Is there a reason to have some sort of a candlelight? Is there a reason to have this?
Pressure canner.
Pressure canner, Janie, basically 30 minutes at 15 pounds of pressure and you can sterilize your equipment in order to do surgeries if you had to. So how would
There's
you...
so many things you can use with this right here, from washing dishes to keeping your important papers and documents dry. This one pan, you can wash the baby up in it, you can wash your clothes in it, you can sterilize your surgical tools in it, you can boil and pressure steam water for clean drinking water, you can, oh my goodness, the list is unbelievable, the things that you can do with a pressure cooker. And yes, you can pressure cook, and we're going to teach you when it gets nice out. We're going to teach you how to use the pressure cooker on a wood or a coal fire, and how to build one and maintain your pressure on an open fire and not on the stove. Because
Yeah,
you might not
you'd
have
have to have wood or some sort of way to heat this.
And we're going to
If
go back days.
electricity goes out, you don't have that. But this is a very wonderful tool.
And you can cook your food in it too, by the way. It will cook in a roast or meat or your neighbor. I'm just kidding.
No.
Are you paying attention? Let's see if you got that. I'll know if you watch the video all the way through if you write the word neighbor below. Did you eat the neighbor? No, but you can pressure cook food in here in 10 to 15, 20 minutes for a whole pot roast and carrots and potatoes. So your food storage, you can cook really, really fast in this, which uses less energy than you would be using on a regular stovetop cook stove. So the pressure canner, I suggest you get yourself a really nice pressure canner, and you practice other ways of using the, get a spare one that you can get on the fire, and get a pressure cooker that does not have that coating on the outside, an aluminum pressure cooker without, I won't call it an inexpensive canner, because they're going to run you anywhere from $45 to $65, $75 for a 7 to 8 quart. Just be sure and put the right amount of water in the bottom, and make sure that you put enough water in that it'll last through 30 minutes of pressure canning. And remember, you still want it to steam those 10 minutes prior, so you're going to lose a little bit of moisture through the original steaming. So steam 10 minutes, put on your 15 pounds of pressure, and then use it as an autoclave. 30 minutes.
Yeah.
They proved it works. So, all right, I want to thank my husband, Dr. John Pendleton, for joining us. We want to thank you for joining us most of all, and I want to thank Hin one more time for sending me this awesome live on the air lit sign. I think that is so cool. And hit that subscribe button, and give us a comment below. Hit the thumbs up if you like this video. Hit the thumbs up. Be sure and share this video. I feel it's a very important video, and I think we covered the subject that a lot of people, a lot of preppers were asking, is should you buy emergency medical kits or not? We think that you should, if for anything else, to have supplies in case you can't get someone to the hospital, but maybe they're low on supplies. Then the supplies themselves could save a family member or save your life by taking them with you if you don't know how to use them. So I think having supplies on hand, or having somebody in your group like John, or other nurses and doctors and stuff like that in your group, I think that's very important. Different people, different knowledges is what makes the group work, I think. Yes. Okay, so we made this video long enough. I want to thank my husband, Dr. John Pendleton, for joining us. This is Dr. Jane Pendleton, and you've been with us for Live on the Air.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So anything you can do to prevent something, you're better off.